Well, Father, we thank you for our country. We thank you for the Word of God. We thank you for people willing to be people of prayer, people of principle, people willing to make a difference in their community. And we thank you that as we work together, we can accomplish much. And as we have this time together, we invite the Holy Spirit to guide our thoughts. And we just pray that you will be glorified and that our time together will be helpful for all who are here. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. I did have a number of people tell me that they really wanted to be here and could not. So graciously, somebody's kind of filming this on their camera, and we'll get it on YouTube or Facebook for later. So if what you're hearing you want somebody else to hear, you can decide by the end of the night. Then that will be available. Just in case you're wondering what this is, and this one will be in the sanctuary. It's a movie called Whose Children Are They? Exposing the Hidden Agenda in America's Schools. So this really has to do with what's being taught today in our schools. And even though a lot of this, they're interviewing people from California, there's actually was like 2 or 3 Minnesota people that were, being interviewed too. So I think as parents, grandparents, citizens, I think we want to know, what are they teaching in our schools that our tax money is paying? And if it's not the right stuff, we should know and know what we can do. So that's what that's about. If you're interested, it's Friday night. It'll start at 6:30. It is not something to bring kids to. It's something adults should be aware of, but not something you want to bring children to. So anyway, that's what that's about. So a little disclaimer before we jump in. What I'm sharing with you is some of my opinions, all right? So I'm perfectly fine with your opinions being different than mine, okay? And what I'm sharing isn't like, this is the Jubilee position on these things, all right? I'm speaking for myself and my opinions, and we're all in a different process on this journey. We're all going to land at different places, and that's perfectly okay. So I just want to make that clear right up front, that what I'm sharing with you is kind of the journey I've been on. Where I'm at right now, that may change next week as I learn more and so forth. And so I'm just wanting to share that so you don't feel like whatever I'm sharing, you have to be on the same page with everything, all right? And the other thing is, at the end, I will open it up if you have questions. And so what I'd like you to do, if you have a question, is maybe write it down on your sheet somewhere so that at the end, or unless you just won't remember it. So that's kind of where we will go. Central Minnesota Freedom Advocates, John and Jenny Davis started this. He's a chiropractor. His office is kind of down by where Menards is. And he's the lead guitar player here. So if you're from Jubilee, you've seen him up there. They weren't able to be here today. But they have kids in school. Actually, they homeschool, but they have kids that compete in high school sports, swimming, that kind of thing. So they were really working hard on trying to get mask mandates removed from the schools and that kind of thing. So they kind of just called together people interested to work together on ways to do that, and they were wanting to make sure that vaccine mandates weren't going to be pushed on students and all of that. So anyway, I went to a meeting of their two, a few faces here was there, and we just, it ended up kind of progressing to where we came up with a name, and the name of the group is Central Minnesota Freedom Advocates. And the mission is advocating for constitutional freedom in central Minnesota. So that group this is what they focus on. And I did this same talk there a couple weeks ago, and some of you were there, some were not. And so today will kind of be a repeat of that, but I'll probably approach it a little bit differently, because the thing with that group is everybody's there because they're on the same page and because they've already probably done a fair amount of study and all of that. Where tonight I'm realizing we're probably going to have people all across the board, where many of you've read up on a lot of this and you have your views on it, and others are like, I haven't heard hardly any of this before. So we're all going to be at different places. But the mission of that group is unite, or the strategy is unite, educate, activate. Let's get people together who are like-minded, and then let's educate ourselves as to what's going on, and then activate. What are we going to do about it? Because one of the things you probably figured out is, when you're sitting down with somebody over a cup of coffee and we're all complaining about how bad things are, you notice that doesn't fix anything? It just gets you frustrated. And so this group is about, what are we going to do about it? And our focus is not the whole world at this point. Our focus is central Minnesota, where we live. What's going on in our schools? What's going on at our city halls and those kinds of things. So we're focused mostly on things locally. So this first question here, what are the current hot topics politically? I wrote a bunch down. Yours is blank. But I would like you to tell me what things in the last year or two do you see as hot topics politically? And I'd encourage you to write some of these down. Not necessarily the ones everybody says, but the ones you hear that, yes, that is a big thing today. So just shoot a few of these out, and then we'll kind of talk about them a little bit. So what do you see as some of the hot topics going on in our country politically, or you're hearing on the news? Votes, voter integrity, or lack thereof. What else? CRT, critical race theory. Hearing a lot more about that. Yes. Well, that's the thing. If a school gets criticized for using CRT, then all you have to do is change the name of it. Then we're not using it, so we're okay, right? What else is going on in our world?
The COVID and vaccine lies.
Okay, COVID, there's a lot of things. There's the testing, there's the vaccine, there's the mandates, there's the masks, there's the jabs, there's the, a whole lot of things connected to that one thing. So COVID, ... is a lot of different things related to that. Inflation, connected to that, high gas prices, supply chain issues. So kind of all of that sort of linked together. Anything else we're missing?
Transgenders.
Okay, LGBT, it depends on by each week or two they add another letter, so I don't even know what they all mean anymore. Did I hear something else?
Transgenders.
Transgender?
Well, that's the T.
It's all connected.
Media lies. Yeah, the media.
Media.
Abortion.
Border crisis. Trafficking.
Ukraine.
The Russian-Ukraine war.
Parental rights. Afghanistan.
What was that?
Afghanistan.
Let me look here. I think some of these might have been said, but let's see if I missed any. The cancel culture, censoring. If you are promoting a view different than the one we're supposed to have, you might get canceled. How about soft on crime? Crime is a huge issue today. I don't think anybody said climate crisis. What crisis? What crisis? Right? Okay.
We're freezing our cookies off here.
But we could reword that. The Green Deal or whatever. The Green Deal would be the issue. Second Amendment might be of interest to some. This came up, but I'll just put it this way: redefining gender, marriage, family, and morals. CRT was mentioned.
New World Order.
New World Order. I'll mention two more, and then we'll kind of jump in. Transhumanism is another thing we're hearing a lot more about. What about surveillance? Is a bigger thing. And by the way, with 5G, it's going to be a lot more surveillance. Great Reset, New World Order. So let me ask you this: of all of these, what one or two, and it might be different answers for different ones, what one or two are you most concerned about? You can just holler them out. voter integrity, high on the list, censorship, one world government, vaccines, all of the above. Okay, so here's kind of how I'm gonna kind of process this. So I hate to admit this, but more than, let's say, 2 years ago and past, I really didn't watch the news near as much as I should have. I mean, I always like, okay, I want to know what's going on, but busy, whatever. I mean, I would watch the news, but not very consistently. And I wasn't digging into, the deeper kinds of things. But then for the last 2 years, I would say I have watched and read more stuff than probably my entire life before that. And why? Well, I think some of it was the issues were getting more important, more impactful, and the pace of things was moving more quickly. And so I felt, I just started feeling like I needed to and felt compelled to pay more attention, dig deeper, and probably some of you can relate to that. And so that's kind of where it started with me, and also I felt like as a leader I probably should kind of know what's going on. So I began paying a lot more attention, but also I kind of would feel like what I was hearing on the mainstream, just something always seemed like they're not telling me everything, or some of that doesn't sound right. And then you might read a different source that would contradict that, and you're like, what's up with that? So one of the first battles is, well, what is true? What can I trust? What sources can I trust? And so that became a challenge. So as I'm digging into all these things and trying to see what's going on, number two there began to cross my mind. Are these issues connected or separate entities? And if they are connected, how? Because at first, one could view each news thing as sort of like a separate snapshot having nothing to do with the other news things. But then the more I listened and really prayed a fair amount too for discernment in it, the more I began to see it this way. Each of these news items is a puzzle piece, and it's connecting them all together that presents a certain picture. So, and I'm not saying that would be the case for 100% of these things, but probably more of them than not, I see as having a connection to a bigger piece. And so, and again, you may or may not feel the same way, but that's how I begin to process it. I think some of these pieces are connected, and I think there's a bigger picture I'm not seeing here. And all of this was a process for me that took a while, because some of the things would be like, this doesn't make sense, and I don't quite get it, and then slowly more and more would come. So I started seeing that many of these are connected somehow. And then the third question, this is at the bottom there, I began struggling with, is are the above issues accidental or intentional? Or another way of asking it, are they the result of incompetence or strategic planning? And I struggled with that one for quite a while, and kind of came to the conclusion that we do have a lot of incompetent people in leadership, but that you could not make all this happen simply by incompetence. That would hardly be possible. So I came to the conclusion that I think many, at least, of these things are not accidents, and many of them are not just the result of incompetence, but that at least many of them are the result of strategic planning. Now again, you may or may not come to that conclusion.
By who?
Now you might say, well, some of these, how can you plan a war? How can you plan a crisis or whatever? Well, there's two thoughts there. Some crises I think have been planned. But even a crisis that isn't planned, one of the philosophies, of the New World Order is never let a good crisis go to waste. So even if a crisis happens that man had nothing to do with in terms of planning it, man can still plan the response. Here's how we're going to use this crisis to accomplish our end. Even if we didn't create the crisis, we can get mileage out of it. So my opinion would be some crises we're facing have been planned, and others, even if they weren't planned, the plan to respond to it in a way to bring about particular results. So turning the paper over, this has been the one that was the hardest for me to try to make any sense of, and that is if some of this is planned, why? Why would anybody want all this stuff to happen? Because my opinion was most of this is not good for Americans. Most of these things are heading in a direction that are bad for America, at least from a Christian perspective or a conservative perspective. So I think one of the hardest things for me to come to grips with is that if this is intentional and these things are bad for America, that means that some people are so evil that they're actually wanting bad things to happen to our nation. How could that be true? But in time, I just kind of had to accept that reality that there are some evil people. There's some good people, but there's some evil people in places of influence that do not want what's best for America and are trying to bring about some negative things from, again, a conservative or a Christian perspective, which then, of course, I had to ask the question, well, why? Why would anybody want America to struggle or to go backwards? And so that's kind of what I want to take a little bit of time on here. And I would say this, when you're looking at somebody's motive for doing something that's harmful, I'm not assuming that everybody's motive involved is the same. Two people could each do the same thing, but each have a different reason for doing it. So I'm not assuming everybody's motive is the same. And in terms of a priority of motives, two people could have a different list, okay? So keep that in mind as we go through these. These are in somewhat of an order, but not an order there's a subjectivity about it, and not an order that is going to apply to every single person. Where I started with under A here is financial gain. We all know the phrase, follow the money. So one of the first reasons why a lot of these things are done is because of who gains financially. And when I say financial gain, I don't mean financial gain for the average citizen, you and I. I mean financial gain for those who are making certain things happen, making certain decisions that are bad for America but good for them. So in everything we face, that's a good question to ask. Who is gaining financially from this? I mean, you could say the war. Who's gaining financially? Well, the war machine, the people who make all the war stuff, they're gaining from it. We could look at vaccines. Well, okay, with the vaccines, who's gaining? Well, the vaccine companies are being rich. We could take every one of these and trace it to somebody's making a lot of money because of that. So I think that is all one of the reasons why certain things are done. And somebody mentioned about the climate crisis. What climate crisis? Well, the whole climate crisis is really, again, not about saving the planet, but it also is who's gaining financially from the different aspects of it. And so often it's the politicians or the people making those decisions. Often the gain is other than just money. And I have this as letter B, political gain. So a lot of decisions made by those in politics have to do with how will this further their political position. It might buy them votes. It might get them favors, different approvals, contributions to their political campaigns. So there's follow the money. Somebody is gaining from this. Who is it? And then there's the political gain. So if a politician promotes something, what are they getting out of it, or their party getting out of it? And typically you'll find answers there. A third one that also took me quite a while before I was able to accept this is another goal of some of these is population control. And it took me a while to believe we have people so evil that they want the population in America and in the world to go down. They believe that for an ultimate utopian world, we've got way too many people. We need to figure out how to get rid of a bunch of people. And that's scary. I mean, when you really think about it, that we have people in high places. And by the way, this is not conspiracy theory. This is not, you got to dig really, really deep to find some of that. You can Google something and find a speech on it where they're telling you that. Or you can read something that gives an update on a meeting they just had. Not long ago, I heard about, what's it called? The Georgia Stones, or what's that called? Yeah, the Guidestones, Georgia Guidestones. If you look that up and you see it, right at the top of it, etched in there is that we need to have only, 500 million people in the world or something like that. And it's written right there. You can read it. And people like Bill Gates and some of these others, they have said these things in interviews, and you can easily find it. So a lot of decisions that are being made, or at least some, are actually with that end in mind. We need to get rid of some people. Now you can kind of think through which things affect population and all of that. But I think I mentioned it in the sermon today. It's kind of like, do I really want to take health advice from people whose goal is to get rid of some people? I mean, I don't know about you, but that seems like a little bit of conflict of interest. Do you think we got too many people on the planet and you're going to tell me to do this for my health? I wonder if there's not something there a little bit fishy. So population control is an issue. And then control in general. I think we all would have to admit that a lot of things that have happened in the last 2 years have been about taking more control of our lives and taking away less of our freedoms. I want you just to think about, it's hard to, being we all went through the last 2 years, but just try to think for a moment if say before December of 2019, if I or somebody else had told you in the next year or two, your churches are going to close down, and schools are going to close down, and you're going to stay home for however long we all stayed home, and most of the stores will be closed, and you're all going to wear masks, and people will have to get a vaccine or lose their jobs. If people question anything about the government, they're going to be censored, and if physicians hold to a certain view, their licenses may be threatened. I mean, on and on I could go. If anybody would have told us that, probably none of us, me included, would have agreed. It's like, there's no way. This is America. We have our constitutional freedoms, and I would never put up with that. And yet, we all put up with however much we each did. I will say the good news is that I think a lot of people are waking up. Yeah. And I think that next time this happens, if it happens again, I think a lot of people are going to, okay, did that once. I'm not going to do the same thing this next time. And of course, we'll all be faced with, what will I do, if all this happens another round. I will just tell you personally, what I will do is the church will be open.
Praise the Lord.
Now, nobody will be pressured to come. We will still live stream, but I'm not closing the doors. Even if they haul me away, I'll start a jail ministry. But at any rate,
well, look at our pastor in Canada.
Yeah,
They put him away.
So my point is, think of all the control we gave up. Why did we do that? Notice under D1, this is kind of how I process this. Crises are used to promote division, fear, and intimidation because people become more willing to give up their constitutional freedoms in exchange for promises of provision and protection. Now think about the whole COVID thing. Now, no matter what your belief was about it, Whether you are vaccinated, not vaccinated, that's not what I'm dealing with. But my point is that what the media told us basically was, first of all, if you discussed your opinion with somebody of a different opinion, I mean, big argument, right? I mean, it's almost like you try to feel where a person's at before you say anything because you don't want this big argument, you know, and then it's your family gatherings. So, on all of these issues, the point really isn't like even just the position. The point is we want division. We want division over all these issues. Well, why? United we stand, divided we fall. So we really are not all that much of a threat if we're all divided and we can't get together on the same page. And so our government was using all this division and then fear and intimidation. So what basically happened is the reason we gave up some of these freedoms is because you said if we do this, we won't get COVID. You said if we do this, we'll recover. You said if we do this, whatever. So we gave up those freedoms because they promised to protect us and provide for us. We'll send you the check. You know? One of the things about government promises is rarely do they keep them. Did everything they say the vaccine would do? Did it follow? Did that work? No. 2 weeks. What was it initially? 14 days for whatever, and then that 14 days turned into how long? First, we were told if you get the shot, you don't have to wear a mask. You won't get COVID. Then we were told that you got to get 2 shots, and now what is it, up to 3 or 4? And then they changed it to you still have to wear the mask, and then they changed it, well, you can get it, it just you won't get it as bad. So, in other words, their promises that if you just take this shot, you won't get it and it'll all be good, it didn't turn out to be true. And so, again, the promise didn't work till now. The stats are showing that in many places, more people are getting COVID that had the vaccine than not, and they've come to the conclusion that no, it won't keep from transmitting or getting it and all of that. So my point is, they told us it would keep us safe, so we did whatever we did, and they didn't keep us safe, and yet we still gave up those freedoms. And now if you notice, those freedoms aren't so easy to get back. Once a freedom is given up, and it's interesting now, you know, it's like, okay, so now the mask mandates were dropped in a lot of the schools, dropped in, I think one of the biggest things for people is airplanes, you know, and you probably saw some of the clips of the stewardesses announcing it, everybody, you know, so happy, and but of course, after the judge said that wasn't constitutional, now they're trying to, you know, get the CDC to say, oh, but we need to take that back, and we need to, you know. So now it's all, well, what's going to happen? Are they going to reverse that or not? Well, they want to at least reverse it in airports and public, you know, transportation places and whatever. So at any rate, the whole point is control, and we will give up controls if we're promised protection and provision. But again, I think we've all learned a little bit in the last 2 years, and maybe are going to be a little more careful about what controls we give up. And then number 2 there, the promoted narrative. Censoring and demonizing to the contrary is an effort to brainwash us and control how we think and act. Now, it might seem like a stretch to some to say that, well, you know, you really think they're trying to brainwash us. I mean, you can find their discussions on how can we get them to believe this. So it's, and you notice in our schools, it's gone from teaching people how to think to teaching people what to think. So it's not about education anymore, it's about indoctrination. So it seems like they want to control more and more of how we think, of what we believe, of our words, our actions. And when you go against that, that's when, okay, we'll remove you from Facebook, or we will threaten you. I mean, who would have ever, you know, regardless of what you think of Trump and his tweets, again, if somebody would have told you before that the President of the United States is going to be removed from all social media, you'd have been like, no, freedom of speech, and he's the president. Obviously, they would never do that. They did it. And think of how much freedom of speech has been robbed from us, and that's in the Constitution, and yet many don't think hardly anything of it. And when you see interviews from a lot of the social media companies, they're talking about how can we do a better job of censoring this disinformation and all of this kind of stuff. So we probably all know people who have been impacted, or maybe you have, by the whole censoring thing. To be honest with you, I'm surprised that the Jubilee Facebook is still functioning and hasn't had any censoring yet. I'm grateful for that. Transhumanism is one of the more recent things that I have found more about. And again, that may sound way out there, and I'm not going to dig deep into the weeds on most of this. But the ability exists. That's not something that's, happening every day, everywhere, but the ability exists to, change people's DNA, and they have the ability to block certain thought processes and so forth. And here's my personal opinion. They've even talked about ways they can, change our makeup so that the part of man that has a spiritual hunger for God and conviction is done away with. Well, my opinion is God will never let it get that far. I mean, think about it. If everybody suddenly got to that point, nobody would ever get saved. God's not going to let it get to a place where people can't even get saved because they can't be convicted and that kind of thing. And that's a whole other subject. But what's the goal? The goal is to make us all, half human, half robots, so we do what we're told and behave and don't rock the boat, don't question and that kind of thing. The other piece that started becoming obvious to me is ruining the American economy is actually a goal for some. And again, why? Why would they want to ruin America? And by the way, to do that, the basically two groups that are attacked is pretty much the same group. The middle class and small businesses, because that's kind of the core of a society, not the huge businesses, but what keeps a society going is middle class people, like probably all of us consider ourselves in that. And how many of you are or have been small business owners? Probably a good chunk of you. Yeah, a lot of you. And you probably found out, if you're still in it especially, that they try to almost make it impossible. And in Minnesota is one of the worst for all of the regulations you got to follow. It makes it really difficult to actually have a profitable business. And during all the COVID stuff, it wasn't Walmart that closed. It was the small businesses, the ones that aren't making billions of dollars and can and people who decided, hey, I got to feed my family, I'm staying open. They were arrested, a lot of them, and given all these huge fines and that kind of thing. And the question maybe would be, why would they want to do that? And it kind of goes back to, if you think about it this way, I think if those in the highest places had their way, I think what it would be none of us would have jobs, and we would all get guaranteed incomes, but it'd be limited, and we would only have access to it to the degree we behave. And then the people with all the money are the Amazons and the Facebook owners and those people, their goal would be to control everything and have basically all the wealth and give us just enough to barely survive. You've probably heard it said this way: their goal is that you will own nothing and be happy. So ultimately they would want to own all the real estate, and all we would do is, again, just kind of get this guaranteed income, which wouldn't be enough. And there's efforts in place to turn a regular currency into a digital currency. And if that ever happened, then obviously they can control that pretty easily. Again, if you don't do what we say, then we're going to block your account. Now think about it. That happened to the truckers in Canada without digital currency. I mean, that is amazing when you stop and think about it, that if a trucker decided to be a part of that rally, breaking no laws, and their government froze some of their accounts, even some of their business accounts, and that was just normal accounts like we all have. It wasn't even digital currency accounts. Well, if they could do that with regular bank accounts, imagine how simple it would be if everything we had was digital. And this, basically is how China already has been operating for a long time. They have a social credit system where basically everything is on like a digital type currency, and all your, information and every medical and everything. But there again, if you do what we say, you have access to it. But as soon as you don't, we block some of it. So that's, I think, where things are heading. And my response as to will all this happen has pretty much been if we let it. If we let it, probably a lot of this will happen. But I don't think it will if enough people stand up and say, I'll do everything I can to keep it from happening. So bottom line is the government wants to make people dependent upon them. And really, I put under F here, socialism. That's really what is, that's how socialist countries work. The government controls the lives of the people. They comply or they get in trouble. As I'm just talking now, I'm thinking about, some of you probably saw this in China. There's supposedly now, a new variant. And they've literally locked people up and not providing them food and stuff. There's one video where you see these high rises and there's screams like these. It's just like eerie listening to these screams come out. But the people are locked in because they need to keep the virus from spreading. And again, not given proper food, nutrition, and I haven't verified, is that all true? I saw it and probably is, but I didn't verify it. But the point is that there are people in these communist countries that have really no recourse. And you've probably seen some of these areas where people do protest. They may get killed or all of that kind of thing. So, and probably some of you saw even in Canada, they were hauling people away to jail who were just protesting. They weren't breaking any laws. It just amazing to see that. Now that's getting pretty close to home when you're talking Canada. We're not talking communist China. We're talking Canada. So anyway, that's kind of the end game, is make people dependent on the government. Socialism, I guess, is where it's going. If you go back and read any of the goals of Marxism, it's really what's happening today in our world. I mean, they're like, here's what number we're on, kind of a thing. And socialism, one of the things I want to emphasize is it is anti-God. Socialism is atheistic at its core. And I think one of the biggest threats to socialism, the Great Reset, One World Order, is Christians. Because as Christians, our allegiance is to God, not man. And because of an allegiance to God, hopefully all of us hold to biblical morals. And that's a threat when the government is trying to get us to basically say there's no such thing as gender anymore. Which is a part of depopulation. I mean, if you think about the end game of that. But I heard a teacher, this was a school teacher the other day, saying this is how, I don't remember if it was a he or she, it was a transgender person, and this was how he or she was teaching this, I don't know, first grade class, whatever it was. When people are born, some of you heard this, doctors guess as to whether it's male or female. Most of the time, the doctors are right. But some of the times, the doctors are wrong. But sometimes they won't know for quite a while if the doctor's right or wrong. Now, can you imagine teaching that to kids who are vulnerable and aren't ready to be told that kind of thing anyway? I have heard like science, health teachers or whatever, even fired because they said you're either born a male or a female. That's just science. Have you ever noticed the phrase "follow the science" is only used when their science backs their narrative? But as soon as there is no science, nothing is said. Okay, transgender, just for example. I feel for people who struggle with identity. That is a real issue with some people. And we should have compassion for people, help them walk through that. So I'm not criticizing somebody who that's a legitimate struggle. But the science still says you are either born a male or female. Now, some people have maybe some, 1 in a million where there's, a mixture, whatever. But bottom line is, 99% of the people are born either a male or female. That's the science. Some science teachers are losing their jobs because they're saying that. And it's just crazy. But my point is as Christians, if we know the word and we believe the word, then we say, no, the Bible says male and female made he them. He hasn't changed that yet. There is not another gender. And how you identify doesn't change, the gender. And I keep wondering where this is going to go. Some of you heard that now there's some students saying they're cats or dogs. And I heard, Sartell, I heard is that way. And in other places. And I've even heard, I don't think this is true in Sartell, but there's even some that put litter boxes in the restrooms. And I asked when I asked this parent the other day, I said, do you, because some of this was coming up, and I said, so wasn't somebody in our church, but I said, do you have kids in school? And the parent said, yes. And I said, could your kids just bring pets if they wanted? He said, no. And I thought, I have a solution to this problem. The solution is accept how they identify themselves. Okay, we acknowledge if you think you're a cat, you are a cat, but sorry, we don't allow pets in school. So you'll have to leave. And if you're a pet, you have no human rights. If you want to be a pet, that's fine, but you have no human rights, and we don't allow pets in school, so you will have to leave. But anyway, that's just how my brain tries to process stuff. But, what I'm saying is if we hold to biblical morals, we are a threat. If we say, marriage is between a man and a woman, and that what gender you're born with is the gender you are, whether you have struggles or not. And, if we say certain lifestyles are immoral, sinful, that's not accepted, in our culture. And here's, as a pastor and as a Christian, here's kind of where my area of interest is. And just think about this for a moment. If I were to preach, which I do, that Jesus is the only way to the Father, that's the biblical truth, right? Yep. Think about it. It wouldn't be unlikely for the government to say, wait a minute, that's offensive to Muslims. Therefore, that's hate speech. You're a domestic terrorist if you say that. You cannot say that anymore. I mean, that's pretty likely that could happen, isn't it? Just with where things are at, and maybe has in some places. Canada, one step further than us in that. Or what if I say what I just said to you? God said He made them male and female. He made them, and that's nowhere is it possible in Scripture or in science to change. Doing a surgery, it doesn't change it. Again, if I say that, I could be told, well, that's hate speech. You are offending people who are changing their identity gender, and that's domestic terrorism. And if you say that, we're going to come in and shut you down. You're going to lose your 501c3. I mean, don't you think all of that is very possible? Absolutely. How do you evangelize if you can't tell people Jesus is the only way? So that's my concern, is not so much all the other things, but it's all connected. But freedom of speech is the freedom to share Jesus. And if that's taken away, our world is really in trouble if we can't tell people about Jesus. And we're going to have to be like the apostles in Acts. We must obey God rather than man. You have to throw us in jail, we'll tell the people in jail about Jesus. But that's why I'm interested in these things. Because, again, we're only 1 or 2 steps away from that happening. And it may happen, but if it does, we have to be willing to pay a price. And my hope with a group like this and just the church in general and people like you is I think we can stop a lot of this if we are willing to be committed, stand up, do what's right, and that kind of thing. I'll kind of get down toward the end here, and then I'll open it up for any questions you have. The Great Reset, this is something that was, and this is not new. This has been in the workings for a long time from a group called the World Economic Forum. And again, it's not conspiracy. You can find their tapes. You can listen to some of their sessions. You can hear their talks. And basically, the goal of the Great Reset is to end up with a new world order and more of a socialist kind of agenda. Well, I was going to go back. This kind of came to me back with the taking America down a notch. Notice one of the things we hear a lot today is equity. Not even equality is mentioned anymore. Equity. Now, if you think about equity, to have equity, America has to come down several notches, right? Because America economically is way above like third world countries. So why is it we have, open borders, and why are we trying to ruin the economy of America? It's because we have to be equitable. We have to have equity. We have to be at the level of all the other countries. Plus, if America's too strong, we may not accept this one world order because we won't want to give up our status and our power and our freedoms and all of that. So the idea is to try to bring America down far enough that we will kind of accept this, one world order thing. So that's kind of the end game with the one world order. And also to if you think about it, if it's now a one world order, there is no U.S. There is no Canada. There's just this global thing with kind of one higher up echelon of leaders that we don't get to vote in, and just that whole thing. The one world order is atheistic, wants to reduce or eliminate religious freedom, anti-gender, marriage, family, biblical morals, and so forth, and is really totalitarian, where the citizens become slaves and know nothing. Now, we could go a lot more into that, but I want to kind of just respect your time and get to number 5, because if we just say, okay, we can go home now, we just all go like, I've told Becky sometimes, like, I think we need to not watch the news right before we go to bed. It's like, so as I mentioned at the beginning, it's good to know all of this, but you got to do something about it. So here's what can we do about it. And I realize probably most of you, maybe all of you, are people of faith praying. And I don't say that lightly. In fact, if we eliminate A, none of the other things are probably going to be all that successful. We can do a certain amount of things as citizens and all that, but this is so far into good versus evil that without God's help, probably a lot of this will happen. So pray, pray, pray. At Jubilee, we have adult prayer meeting every Wednesday night, and some of these things become part of our prayer. We do a second Friday of the month
What time is that
prayer thing. Wednesdays, we have a meal at 6:30, and then prayer 7 to 8. And then the second Friday of the month, we do a 6 to 8. So whether you're part of a prayer group or come to this, or you have your own stuff, but on our own at least, let's regularly be praying for our nation and God's intervention, because things are at a point where it's going to take divine intervention. Stand up for what you believe, even when it costs you something. And we're probably at a place where it may cost us something. The early church, their faith cost them something. And probably all of you know, or maybe some of you were faced with, okay, I got to get the vaccine or I lose my job. Well, that's a big decision. That's a high price tag if you're going to, lose your job or whatever other privileges, and without it you can't fly on the plane, or whatever it is. And then network with other like-minded people to advocate for what you believe and for constitutional freedoms. So that's what this Thursday group, by the way, it's not every Thursday, it's maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks. So if you end up getting on there, you'll get an email update, and you'll be told when meetings are. And those meetings can be about any one of these topics. But we're gonna do a lot better working together, and we're more influential in a community. When we in numbers influence. And then D is sort of similar. Volunteer in areas where you are passionate and gifted to make a difference. Don't conform against your convictions and constitutional rights. And resist the Great Reset and the One World Order. The last thing I'll mention there is just a little more on the Great Reset. This is right out of their stuff. Here's what they said. The COVID pandemic has revealed that the world as we know it isn't working and isn't organized to handle global crises. Therefore, the world needs a major makeover, a great reset. So COVID was kind of used to basically say we need to do things differently. Bottom line is so we have more control. So it's basically a top-down, one-world government where the citizens will be slaves to the government. Other values include, and we talked about some of these, climate change, where citizens basically give up resources and freedoms to fund global elites' personal projects. Equity, more government regulations, which will lower standard of living. Inclusion. Here's what I mean by inclusion. Let's just say, for example, football. Let's say they tell us that we have to have X number of this group of people as head coaches. Let's say it's transgender. Let's say we need one transgender coach for every 20 coaches. Let's just say they did that. Okay, well, what is that going to result in terms of the level of coaching? It's going to go down, right? Because it's not who's the most qualified coach. We don't care about what their beliefs are. Who's the most qualified coach? No, now anybody who's not transgender is discriminated against. So even if they pick the most qualified transgender coach, probably the most qualified person didn't get the job overall. Therefore, performance goes down, which means standard of living goes down. And we're seeing that, I mean, this last judge that was put in, it's that kind of thing. It's not who's the most qualified. Whoever's the most qualified, we don't care what gender they are. We don't care what color their skin is. We just want to know who's most qualified to do the job. But we were told, no, it's got to be, a black woman. Well, that's fine, but is she the most qualified? That's really what matters. Again, I don't care what gender she is, what her skin color is. It's just who's the most qualified. So as soon as you start applying that to all different areas of life, then there's actually other people get discriminated against, and then again, the quality of everything begins going down. More government regulations, and on their higher taxes, digital currency. Oh, control of healthcare is huge. They're going to want to have all our health stuff on a card and tell us, when we need to do certain things. This is the last thing I'll mention, but I was reading about this a while back. They actually have now, it's not like marketed right now, but they actually have these toilets. Our tax money paid for all this research, by the way, where basically what it does is when you poop in the toilet, it tests everything and sends your details in the cloud, so that and by the way, this is kind of crude, but you're all adults. The way it's connecting to you is your butt print, just like you have a fingerprint. You have a butt print, but it's confirmed. Yeah, but no pun intended. When you flush the toilet, it matches your fingerprint to your butt print, so it's confirmation you're the person. And then it analyzes your poop. And then tells, if they think there's a need, it tells your doctor where you're at so that they can tell you what you need to have done. What I'm thinking just to be mean is, okay, I'm not flushing the toilet. Let's see. I'm going to use somebody else to flush. We're going to really mess them up. That is out there. I mean, it's in prototype and it's working. It's not like suddenly they're everywhere, but and they actually can take, it's about this big, and they can actually insert it into the side of a regular toilet. Aren't you glad your tax money is being used so wisely?
Is this called a smart toilet?
It probably is called a smart toilet.
Smart ass.
That was great.
So, I don't necessarily want to pick like one thing and go deep into the woods, because as you can tell, there is so much there. And here's what else I realized. Where I'm at, some of you are like way past me. You've like, oh, I believed all that 6 months ago, and now I believe this, this, and this. And I might not be where you're at yet. I may get there, I may not. So again, all I've shared with you is my journey and where I'm at. Okay, that's just it. And again, some of you, maybe you've studied a lot of this out more and so forth. But I want to just, where I really like to go, rather than finding out what everybody knows, and that is questions. What questions does this bring up that you would like to ask?
So, I'm really concerned about the well, one of the many problems, but the border, at the end of the Biden administration could be 20 million people. And is this being done more for the corporations, that got in for the big corporate powers for cheaper labor, or for their votes to constantly get Democrats? And then my second question is, do you think a change of both the Senate and the House this November, which I'm working for candidates, will make a difference?
Great questions.
Yeah, because I'm hoping that, but I don't know, is it in?
Border crisis, and again, some of you may have studied this out more than me. My opinion is that it has multi-reasons. I think one of the reasons is buying votes. Yeah, whatever party lets you in, yeah, who are you gonna vote for? Duh, Whatever party, gives you a lot of free, now did you hear that they all got free cell phones? Did you hear that? But it's so we can track you,
Right.
yeah, really. So if you're an American citizen struggling, they're not gonna give you a cell phone, but if you sneak across illegally, you get a free cell phone that the rest of us pay for. So I think it is, if suddenly 20 million people get to vote, yeah, they're gonna vote for who gave them those handouts. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think it goes back to equity. We have to weaken America. How do you weaken America? You get rid of its borders. You let the rest of the world in. And what have you just done? You've just redefined, America. And by the way, I'm all for people being able to immigrate legally. Okay, if that wasn't that, who of us would be here? Our ancestors all got here somewhere, So I'm not at all against any of it in terms of coming in. It's just do it legally, follow the laws, And a while back I was joking with somebody, it was back earlier with COVID when they weren't allowing truckers, I think, to come from America to Canada unless they were, vaccinated and whatever. And I thought, wow, that is interesting. And then I kind of made this comment, well, all they'd have to do, and this is a joke, of course, all they really have to do is if they can get to Mexico somehow, they can walk across the border, they won't need vaccination, and not only that, our country will pay you to go to whatever place you want to go. We'll put you up and feed you, give you a cell phone. I mean, free vacation if you can just find a way to get to Mexico. But it's like, how inconsistent is that? You can't let a trucker across who's alone in that cab, probably not going to give anybody any, and doesn't unload the trucks. That you can't come across, but millions of people can walk across with no tests, no vaccines, no anything. So just interesting. Politically, one of the challenges that I think we have is obviously, and I'm guessing the majority of people here probably typically vote Republican. And I always say it this way, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I vote for, I think, whichever candidates most reflect my values and morals. It just happens to be, in my opinion, that's more often Republican than not. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of evil Republicans. Amen. And a lot of, you hear the term rhino, Republican in name only. There's a lot of people who say they're something, but vote in ways that don't back that. So just because somebody's a Republican, and that's normally how I vote, doesn't mean I trust them. And so to me, it's a little bit more, it takes discernment, I think, to live in the day we live in, because so many people lie. That we need to have discernment and pray who to vote for. Can it make a difference if we get the right people in office? I think it definitely can. But as I mentioned, without God, it's not just a numbers game. So it's both. It's both. We do our part. The Bible talks about when the righteous, are in control, the people rejoice, and when wicked control, the people, groan. So there's that reality. So yes, it'll make a difference, but without God, it won't fix everything. That's, I guess, my answer. Yes?
On this issue about voting and things, one of the things that over the years has frustrated me is the judges. why are we voting for judges when we don't know anything about them?
And they don't give us any information.
And it's
either.
very difficult to find anything out. So maybe that's something that we could, look in your community, find out, like, we're just moving, we're in the process of a move right now to a new community, we're gonna have to figure everything out there, but, I'm gonna see if there's a group up there doing anything, but if we can figure out something for judges.
Very good. Joan?
If you call MAD, you know what MAD is?
Mothers Against Drunk.
Yeah, against drunk driving. They go into court with a lot of judges, so that they would know. Also, there's a Republican, that's an attorney, a lawyer.
There's actually a Republican attorney? Seriously?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
It's true.
Is that like
I'm
is
kidding.
Christian attorney an oxymoron?
Hey, Mark?
Yes.
Can you talk more about the people that built the Georgia Guidestone, the association that they belong to, and who they're loyal to?
Yeah, I'd say that's above my, at this point, but I would say this, if you're interested in a topic like that, obviously it's very easy to YouTube or Google and you'll see all the background on it. Now, you'll probably find some conflicting things as well, but yeah, that's one that I've read a little bit about, but I don't know enough about to say a lot other than it is strange that something like that is in Georgia and states the goal of the population and all these other things. And yeah, I think there's all kinds of probably witchcraft type things that have been a part of the origin and all that. What were you gonna ask something, Stacey?
I was. I think one thing that would help is I don't know if necessarily us, but I think your average person doesn't really believe in the true evil.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very hard for me when I started finding this out, how evil things are and are getting. So I think educating people about that, and I'll give 2 examples of very current things that are happening right now. All of the fires in the food processing plants, those, my opinion, are not, we're now suddenly accidentally having all these food plants going down in smoke. No, they are planning a food shortage for us.
Absolutely.
The second thing is California's, they're trying to, the abortion law. They're trying to enact an abortion law, and that law would give the mother, full legality to murder her infant up to 28 days after birth. So you take your newborn home, if things aren't going how you like, you can do whatever you want. The father cannot stop it if that law passes. I mean, they're trying to ruin the Bible. I mean, the fathers are non-existent, have no power.
The government's the father.
The coroners, law enforcement, your neighbors can be sued if they try to interfere with you and your infant.
Wow.
So you want evil.
But in case some of you haven't
It's
heard,
coming.
in
It's
the
there.
last, I think it's 30 days, like a dozen food plants have burned down.
Yes.
2 of them, planes crashed into. Now, it's like, what are the odds of 2 planes crashing into 2 different food plants in 2 different states? And just how did all these fires start? Yeah, an accidental fire can happen here and there, but it'd be interesting, what are the odds that many food plants of all places, there's a failure of this? Yeah, so obviously people are like, that just seems way more than coincidental. Especially when there's a food shortage, so I'm sure we're gonna hear more about that, but that stuff like that is just, okay, here and then here.
Who specifically is doing that, or is it a group of the globalists or the New World Order?
The food,
Or
as
any
far as
of
the
it?
food?
Yeah,
the
there
fires?
has to be all interconnected, like you mentioned earlier.
Definitely, you know, there's something's causing them. I mean, obviously, and in my opinion, that sounds way too unlikely to be coincidence.
Yep.
And that it all happened in a short period would imply that there's some strategy plan, that somebody making it happen. Now, you know, the unfortunate thing in our day is will it be examined with people you can trust who will actually find out the source and tell us? You know, because it's kind of like, you know, January 6th, you know, do we really know what happened there and all that kind of stuff. So who knows if we'll really find out the truth. But Gary, I think you had a...
Well, that's an opportunity to buy from our local farmers and hobby farmers. There's a Facebook group called Farm Direct Minnesota. And if you belong to that Facebook group, you'll find all the local farmers that are selling eggs, you know, chickens ready to eat, you know, beef, all kinds of stuff. You don't have to buy the processed foods.
That's good, Gary, and you can, if you didn't write that down, you can check with Gary on that. And, you know, I think there's a lot of things now, and of course we're in the right time of year, that you may want to grow some stuff if you have land. I know the group this Thursday group, there's a priest there named Father Voigt, and he's really into, what is it, hydroponics or whatever you call it. So he's going to do a session on how to do that. And he says you can grow food in Minnesota 9 months out of the year inside. You don't even need dirt. And some of you maybe know stuff about that. I don't know anything about it. But, you know, something you may want to consider, especially if you have, you know, kids or grandkids that you got to feed. You know, there could be times we do without. And so you may have to think through, okay, should I do some preparation and do whatever God puts on your heart to make some preparations. Yeah, Chris.
Should we be recording our conversation here for fear that it'll be censored, or talking about the Facebook issue until Mark Zuckerberg decides to cancel that Facebook account or whatever it happens to be?
Well, that's a good question, and maybe I can chat with the guys back there. Can we like put a password on or something where we give people the password who want to watch it, and you know, maybe there's something on that order too. So I don't know what all the guidelines are, and if this is enough time.
I put all kinds of stuff on Facebook. I've never been canceled.
You've never been canceled. Yeah, and Gary puts quite a bit out there, so we might be safe on this. See, we didn't say the name of any particular politicians, did we? That maybe will keep us from it. But.
No, we didn't.
Yes.
So we talked about how important prayer is, but my question is, how come we never gather as a community in the National Day of Prayer anymore?
That's right.
Which is Thursday.
Governmental.
Oh, yeah, this is Thursday.
Well, I'll respond this way. I used to lead it,
I know.
and what started happening over time is people just quit coming. Well, first of all, there was a community group, not a Christian group, but a nonprofit that was paying for, I think it was a newspaper ad, and I think we had to get a permit and pay for that, and then they stopped doing that, in which case, you know, we ended up just covering that. But it got to a point, and this was disappointing to me, is, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will anyway, but it came to the point where the only pastors that would come is if they were asked to pray, then they would come. And still they wouldn't typically tell their people about it. So they'd come in, pray, leave, and then the next year, if they weren't asked to pray, then they didn't. And, you know, and I realized too, most people have jobs that they can't go there during, because it's noon to one kind of a thing. So I realized a lot of young families or people who, you know, work further away or whatever. So it got to where, you know, I could hardly get pastors to come and pray, and that there just was a very poor turnout. So actually, I kind of stepped aside, and then actually, pastors Jerry and Carol Smith from Place of Hope, they actually picked it up and ran with it, and they've done it ever since. It's just that I don't think they promoted it, you know, much. So, I mean, typically what would happen there is, you know, I'd get a text like an hour before, can you come and pray or something like that, you know, not so it typically hasn't been organized enough to even announce it at, you know, church, because like, I don't know if anything's happening, you know, that Thursday or not. But to their credit, you know, they kept it going, and I think it's still going, and we've been a part of the last, probably not the last one we did, but a couple of them before that. But again, it hasn't been very well promoted, so a lot of people haven't known it, but it has still been happening.
In addition to the National Day of Prayer, last year was the first year the White House did not use the word God in the National Day of Prayer. And I just moved from a city of about 200,000 people in Colorado, and our city council had a declaration for the city, and the Day of Prayer actually became a day of prayer, meditation, and reflection. So there is the whitewashing and just erasing the true meaning of it. So you get rid of the meaning, people stop caring.
Well,
Yes,
it
Brian.
Might be more effective touching base with those individuals and churches that could actually meet, maybe sort of the question, once a month, maybe on a Wednesday night, together and intercede for those needs, than trying to make it a big citywide, because there are many that would come and should be praying together as a believing community. Just thinking.
Good input. And a lot of you know Alice from the church here, and she is overseeing what's called the Burn. And really that's kind of the vision of the Burn, is uniting believers from all different churches and moving it to different localities, and having extended worship and prayer times. The last one was at Place of Hope. It's been here before. There's been some outdoor ones, and so that's something that maybe could be purposed or adapted slightly to maybe include a little bit more of the prayers over the national things, and because that is one thing already at least in place, and she's done a good job of like bringing in different worship teams, and each team might take an hour or whatever, and so fortunately there's already some things that are kind of happening in that direction, but could certainly expand. Well, I don't want to keep you real long, but take a more. By the way, there is coffee back there if you want any. But yeah, go ahead.
My question was, why do you think that most of the pastors have totally ignored this and won't stand up? And because this is a spiritual war. This is a war between good and evil. This is not Republican, Democrat, left. This is evil that is trying to take over. You can go right to George Soros, you can go to Bill Gates, they're all part of this one world takeover, whatever you want to call it. And over the past, since they took the Bible and prayer out of schools in 1963, the church has done nothing. The pastors have not stood up, because if we would have done it in 63, we wouldn't have this today, probably. If we would have stood up in 1973 when they did abortion law in the Supreme Court, if the church would have stood up and done something, why are the pastors, and I'll use the term, woke? Why are they
Well,
so
that's a great question, and we may need to ask some, but my opinion would be that I think some are afraid that if they address some of these things, some people might leave their church. Maybe, I don't know that people are all that afraid right now of something, the 501c3 being revoked. I think that's a likelihood at some point, but it's not like the first time you address it, suddenly it's going to go there. So I don't think people are so afraid of that at this point. But I would say more than any, they're afraid that some people will be offended and leave, and they don't want people to leave, and so.
Or are they just changing? I'm seeing it at my church, and I'm like, I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like how I feel anymore.
We've got some room here.
I will say, I will say this too.
I'll stand.
Some may not know all the stuff we're talking about. Some may not have just taken the time to know. And here's what can happen too. Let's say a pastor's really not sure what they believe about this. You know who they will hear from? They will hear from their most extreme member, who will give them the most, and so right away they'll be like, oh, this stuff's way out there. instead of maybe something a little more palatable and well researched and defended and so forth. So some may feel like I don't know enough, to say much, and as probably all of you know, if your only source of news is mainstream media, in fact, it's sad. I heard somebody the other day in higher places basically say they've come to the conclusion that whatever the mainstream media is saying, it's probably about the exact opposite, and you'll be pretty close. Gary?
Can you talk about Nasera and currency, gold-backed currencies?
I think all of those things are just beyond the depth I want to go on all of this, because again, every one of these things is so deep, and I've not studied a lot of those out. And I would say whichever of those kinds of things interest you, dig in, And one of the things about uniting with people that's helpful, there is so much information out there, there's no way any of us can study it all. But if you have an interest, I have an interest, you have an interest, and what are you reading, we can feed off each other, or even find resources from each other. Well, yeah, here's what I found if you want to read more. I do want to mention this one, because it hasn't come up much right now, but the whole Ukraine war thing. When I first started watching all of that, my first thought or sense was there's something bigger going on here than we're being told. And then again, kind of whatever the mainstream's pushing, it's probably different than that. And I've just been amazed at how the mainstream media is basically the narrative is Putin is this terrible, evil person. Zelensky's the hero trying to lead, Ukraine to victory, and we should all get behind him and send all this money and poor Ukraine, and that's kind of the narrative. And there's something about human nature that we have to pick a good guy and a bad guy, right? I mean, if you watch any sports, one of the first things you do, whether you're mindful of it or not, is who do I want to win, who do I want to lose? Who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? That's just how so the narrative is Putin and Russia, they're the bad guys, Ukraine, they're the good guys. But here's my view, there are no good guys in this battle. To me, it's a little bit like two bad gangs going at it. None of them are good. And we keep hearing this, fight for democracy, fight for democracy. Ukraine isn't a democracy, so how does that work out? By the way, Zelensky is a graduate of the New World Order. And I don't want to go too deep into this, but many of the photos we've seen, they have found a lot of these photos are not even from this war, it's from old wars. They're also finding that some of these scenes we're seeing are actors, and they've actually filmed and had the crews there and made this stuff. Not completely. And here's what yes, once the camera went by, they got up, and then some of that accidentally got on some of the footage. Now, I will say this: we should be compassionate for innocent citizens who are being killed, whether they're Ukrainians or anything else. So I am not downplaying. We should be generous to citizens that have no say in this, and are having needs and all of that. But I guess I'll say this much. The Donbass area really has acted more independent for many years versus it being sort of like seen as Ukraine. And the majority of people there are Russian-speaking people. And for the last 8 years, the Ukrainian government has been slaughtering the people there. But why didn't we hear any about that? Why didn't we do sanctions there? And the soldiers that were doing that are largely American trained soldiers. And the other group of soldiers there are the neo-Nazis. And so I'm not defending Putin in any way, because I think we're talking about two evil people. But really, when he stepped in there, it was because of the atrocities in Donbass against Russian-speaking people. And the Minsk agreement, Zelensky violated. And so he's just stepping in, defending Russian people on one level. And he's also trying to dismantle the US-funded biolabs, because they are a danger to the Russians who are next door. And from people who actually live there, they've been reporting that some of the atrocities we're seeing, it's the Ukrainian soldiers doing, not just the Russian soldiers, and especially the neo-Nazis. And I've seen footage where Russian soldiers are feeding Ukrainians and helping them with certain humanitarian things. So it's a mess, and it's very difficult to know what to believe. I marked this verse, and this has kind of been something I keep going back to. I'll just read it to you quickly here. Proverbs 26:17. He who passes by and meddles in a quarrel not his own is like one who takes a dog by the ears. My question is, have we meddled in a quarrel that's not our own? And that's my opinion. My opinion is let them go at it. I mean, if you saw two gangs fighting, would you be like, I think one has more knives than the others, I'm going to give the other side, make it even. No, you're probably like, I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with this. And then, of course, there's all the, I mean, for example, Hunter Biden helped finance one of the biolabs, and they've been running for a long time. And so my point is, there's more going on there than we know. And of course, you probably know there's been a lot of politicians' kids that have gotten money from there. And why Ukraine? I mean, you think about it, it's not that big a place, and yet all this focus on Ukraine. But it's a smoke screen too to get us, you know. Go ahead, and then we'll wind it down.
Part of the Ukraine thing is also that it's one of the #1 human trafficking areas in the world, and the neo-Nazis are part of it. Part of our government is part of it, and they make huge dollars. And part of this fight, I believe, is they are trying to take down some of the neo-Nazis and end the human trafficking, get rid of the tunnels. I mean, and also it's a huge money laundering.
For the
So
US.
for the US, Biden, all them, so they're trying to take all that down, so Putin's not my hero or anything, believe me.
Right.
But I truly believe what he's doing can have some good consequences, hopefully. And the neo-Nazis are not letting some of the Ukrainians leave. And Russia is trying to protect these people, but they're twisting it and making it look like the opposite.
My friend.
Mark?
And it's also, and then I'll get it to Brian, and it's also a really good way to make America poor quick. Let's just send billions of dollars over there. And then, of course, our gas prices have to go up, and we blame him, and now food prices go up. So the war is benefiting, making America poorer quicker. You know, again, one of the end games. Brian, and then I'll close.
Well, first of all, there is such a thing as the fog of war. The other thing is, we've been trying to start a war with Russia for 10 years. Doing everything possible. Trump came in and said, well, they should actually be our friend. Putin, at least he says, that he was brought into Christianity when Solzhenitsyn was in prison, and he would spend time with him. And Solzhenitsyn was discipling him, and which is something. And Archbishop Krill, they traveled together for I don't know how many years. He didn't do anything without Krill's counsel and so on. I'm not calling him a born-again, spirit-filled Christian, okay? I just feel like anybody that all of the leaders that are pure Satanists, we could go through the whole list of them, are against. I'm kind of for. And yet I know this is nonsense. If the Ukraine would have just said, okay, NATO's out, we're suing for peace, we're shutting down, wiping out the genocide against Donbass and so on, it would have been settled.
Yeah. They don't want it settled.
No.
I'll end with this, just kind of a last thing. Do you know what's killing more teens and young adults in America than COVID ever did?
Suicide.
Suicide, and what else? What drug? How do you suppose that gets in? The border. And who makes the bulk of it? China. So you think about it, it's made in China. It's coming across our border. We're letting it in. What is the goal? Reduce the population? I mean, those are just, again, things that are linked all along. Well, we could keep going, but I will stop. You're welcome to hang out, chat, grab a cup of coffee or whatever, but let me pray. Father, thank you that there is hope because you are all powerful, and I don't believe America's reached its full God-given destiny yet. And Lord, we're going to stand with you in faith, believing that you're going to send a revival, a reformation that will call our nation back to you. And Lord, help each one of us pray and believe you to move mightily. Help us, God, not to be ashamed of our faith. And Lord, help us to be willing to stand up for righteousness and holiness and not compromise, even if it costs us something. Yet at the same time, Lord, may we be people with soft hearts, people who are compassionate, people who are respectful. And give us wisdom, Lord, to know how to respond to the different things we face. And we thank you, God, that no matter what happens, you are faithful. And we can trust you. And I thank you that we can strengthen one another and encourage one another and work together at making our community and our world a better place. And we do ask for your help, Lord, and for you to move powerfully in the land. And I pray a blessing on each one here. And thank you, God, for that you're going to watch over us and provide for us no matter what happens. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, hey, thank you.